not sponsored. Lomography recently announced their new lens, the Petzval 80.5mm Mark II. I didn't know who or what Petzval was, but fortunately for us, I have the internet and at least a 3rd grade reading level, so bear with me for a second. The Petzval lens dates back to 1840 in Vienna, where Professor Joseph Petzval invented what they call the first portrait lens. The Petzval lens is known for its characteristic out-of-focus elements, or bokeh as we call it nowadays. The background blur has a sort of swirl to it, and it gets really intense towards the edges of the frame. Anyway, Lomography has dabbled with the Petzval style lenses in the past, but now they're kickstarting a new version, one that's optimized for both photo and video. But I was interested in getting my hands on one largely because my favorite film of 2019, The Lighthouse, actually used an old Petzval lens for some of the shots, in their words, for the heightened moments or flashbacks. By the way, awesome movie. Definitely go watch it if you haven't seen it already. What? Hey guys.
Okay.
How's it going?
Good, how are you?
Pretty
You're picking
good.
up the lens?
Yes.
Alright. This is it. That's the new prototype of the Petzval 80.5.
That's really awesome. It looks so good.
Yeah. Enjoy shooting, but be careful with it. It's the only prototype we have in the US, so...
Okay, I'll guard it with my life. And that was the last time Lomography ever gave me anything. That's a joke. That's a joke. Just kidding. Lomography, don't call the police, please. Before we get into this, just a quick note, Lomography let me borrow this lens, clearly. I'm not being paid or anything like that though, these are my thoughts on the lens. Also, I didn't have it for very long, just 5 days. Also, this is a prototype version of the lens. It seemed pretty solid to me, but it is subject to change because it's not the final version. While I only got to use this lens for a pretty short while, I have a few thoughts that I'd love to share about the lens, specifically for portrait photography. The lens is considerably sharp in the middle. Obviously not at the edges, but that's kind of the point of this lens. I decided to spend a lot of time using this lens wide open or close to it in order to really see the swirl effect. What I learned pretty quickly while using this lens is that the background is really key to the effect. I found that the more colors and the more seemingly cluttered the background is, the better the effect will render. On Monday, my first day with the Petzval, it was pouring rain. It was very gray and overcast. The few photos I got to take, which were of course indoors or by windows or under overhangs or whatever, you could barely see the effect. It's there, but it's not present, you know what I mean? Then, a few days later, no rain, lots of trees and stuff in the background, and suddenly, it feels like we're shooting on a different lens. The swirl effect is extreme, there's no doubt about it. It's certainly not for everyone, but I think it's really cool. Though I can see how in some cases it might become a little distracting. To me, this isn't necessarily a lens for every single shot. The other really important thing to consider while shooting on this lens is the distance between your subject and the background. I found that when you're really close to your subject, just all up in their personal space, the effect isn't nearly as pronounced as when you're several feet back, you know, more of a medium shot. One potential flaw I noticed about the lens while I was using it is the way the swirls enter the frame. Now this is only going to be true of certain subjects, but my friend Chris here, he's a pretty tall dude. When I went for a portrait shot, because of the way the swirls enter the frame, it was pretty damn near impossible to get his head in focus. Same with his feeties, he's just kinda long and he's just getting lost in that swirly bokeh. The only real solution was to back up, to go further away from the subject or recompose entirely. Granted, this is an issue that's very specific to this pose, very specific to this camera orientation, and very specific to this dude, but it is worth noting, and maybe flaw is too intense of a word, but keep it in mind when you're shooting on the lens. And just for fun to see what it would look like, I stopped down to like f11, f16 and just did some shots of architecture just to see how the lens performs with the aperture closed down. Gotta say, looks pretty nice. One other thing I noticed is if you shoot towards the sun, you're very likely to get some really intense lens flares. Now, some people might think these are cool, other people might think they're awful. I'm kind of in the middle. They're cool looking, but they are extremely distracting. One other thing that I think is worth mentioning about this lens is the way it renders skin tones. Apart from having the really unique bokeh and all that, there's an overall kind of softness, vintage feeling about it. It really accentuates the skin and it seemingly hides some of the blemishes. The Petzval lacks that clinical sharpness that some of my Canon and Sony lenses have. And as a result, you get some really nice skin tones. And I'm talking the range, with the aperture being wide open or closed up. So this is the part of the video where the roll of film I shot would be, if I had one, because I did a nice rookie move there and I just put a roll through and I didn't test the camera and I never used it before and it came out blank. So yeah, look at that bokeh, that looks really great. I guess you'll have to use your imagination. Considering I had such a small window, I really prioritized shooting portraits on this lens while I had it. I did dabble with video though, it's fun to use and it gives a really interesting look for sure. It is fantastically difficult to focus this thing while you're holding it in your hands and not look like you're vibrating. It is just a combo of my camera not having IBIS and moving the ring around on an 80mm lens. It happens, but we can safely file this under things that are not aesthetic. You need some sort of tripod or stabilizer for this. Or you can just not focus. I'm not a huge fan of that option though. I really do want to emphasize though, the footage itself looks awesome. I'm just a little shaky when I go handheld. I did get a chance to put this mama on a C300. It was getting kind of dark out, but ooh, that's a nice look. I would love to mess with that a little bit more in the future. I didn't really get to use the lens long enough to know all of the secrets within, but I do have a few thoughts regarding ease of use and ergonomics. You know how I roll. First off, this lens is kind of thick. It's metal, it's brass, I think. Yeah, it's brass. So it's a little weighty. Because of the finish on the lens, it is prone to fingerprints and smudgies and scratches probably. At least the prototype version is. But it does look gorgeous. It is like the most regal of doorknobs. I love it. That sounded really disingenuous. I will say though, much like the swirly bokeh effect in the photos, the lens itself is not subtle. Walking around Manhattan, I definitely saw a few heads turn to look at what the hell I was holding. Chalk that up to a good or a bad thing. It does look special though, which among photographers is a really cool thing. But if you're out and about shooting photos, that might not be the kind of attention you want to draw. The focus ring is super smooth. It has a decently long throw, which again is great for video, and the aperture ring is really smooth as well. The lens has this little slot where you can put in these bokeh shapes to make hearts and stars and diamonds and stuff like that. They're these little metal cards that just kind of bloop, just slot right in there. It's a nice thing to have. It's something that honestly I feel like I wouldn't use too often. It's definitely more convenient than cutting them out of cardboard like I've done in other videos in the past, but just not necessarily something I would use. To me, I think the swirly bokeh is beautiful enough and doesn't need anything else to it, but the option is there. But overall, the lens is built like a tank. It feels really sturdy, it feels really premium. The materials are great, and it's fun to use. It feels good on the camera and it feels good in the hands. The Lomography Petzval 80.5mm Mark II is a really unique lens. The portraits are just really special, the skin tones are great, and the bokeh is beautiful. That said, to me, it is a niche lens. I don't think I would shoot every single portrait I ever take on this lens. But that said, I also value the ability to switch through lenses. To me, I think I would go for the black one, just because it's a little bit lower profile. The other thing too is that lens actually will have the bokeh control, so you can change the intensity of that swirl effect behind your subject. But on the other hand, these lenses aren't exactly cheap either. The Kickstarter is still up. It's definitely worth checking out if you're into these kinds of specialty lenses. I will say it is a little pricey, but it is also a very premium build. So up to you, not sponsored. Go do you. I'm not gonna lie, I was kind of bummed when I had to give the lens back. I wanted to shoot on it some more. So anyway guys, those are my thoughts on the early prototype version of the Lomography Petzval 80.5mm Mark II. A lot of fun to use. Lomography, Birgit, thank you so much for letting me borrow that lens. I know it was super crazy that week to get it to me and give it back, but it was really dope. And just a mega huge shout out for all the people who helped make this video, the people who modeled for me, Tree, Chris, and David. They're all wonderful people and you should go check them out on Instagram. And also thank you to another Chris for helping me film film some of the B-roll. And guys, I hope you enjoyed the video. Hope you enjoyed looking at this lens or whatever. Maybe smash subscribe, that'd be really cool, and hit that like button for me. Share the video. I'm on the socials. You can find me on MySpace, Instagram, Discord, Twitter, TikTok. You know where I am. Let's hang out, guys. And as always, I will see you next week. I love you. Oh my god, I just said I love you. Things are moving so fast. Alright, bye. Twas ye! Tense towards the edge. Just kidding, that was, I have some thoughts on it that I'd love to share with you. Announce the big pet fucking kill me. Isn't
Like and subscribe to Sweet Lou Photography. The man.